Hi, how you doing, and welcome back to another video on the channel. What we have for you today is our wildcard video going into game week 31 of FPL. It is important to acknowledge that we are recording this before Sunday's games have kicked off, so who knows what's happened in those games. Hopefully none of the players featured in today's video have gotten injured, but if they have, we're going to talk about some alternatives as well. If you are new to the channel, please do like and subscribe. It is in fact my birthday today, so if you were ever going to subscribe, what a great day to do it on. But thanks for all the support so far this season as it goes. So we're going to look at teams to target to begin with, and I think you're going to want to plan for at least double game week 34, and how much you want to take into account beyond that really is determined by how many chips you've got left, whether you've got the free hit chip left or whether you've just got the wild card. So we're going to look at teams who do double in 34, as that is the biggest game week to go. And we're going to start with Wolves. Now, I know Wolves are sort of a mid-table team. A lot of times they don't have a lot to play for, but the fixtures are pretty good, and they do factor in some lower league teams that are maybe a bit out of form, or you would at least fancy maybe the odd clean sheet or the occasional goal against. And they do also have a double home game week in 34 as well. I think the players that they've got in the teams that you might be looking at are fairly cheap, so it would enable you to get in more expensive options elsewhere in your team. So there's no surprise with the teams we're going to have in the next couple. Man City are as obvious as it gets. I think their title run-in is probably the best set of fixtures out of any of the top three teams. And we know what they're capable of. We know they kind of drill down and just production line fixtures and results, and they get 2 goals up early on and then kind of coast. So there might not be the big hauls to have, but if you were considering getting in Man City attackers, I think when they play teams like Palace and Luton, maybe even Nottingham Forest, you can expect some goals to be scored there. So the next team we've got is Liverpool, and they're another team that double in 34 and actually have a pretty nice double game week with Fulham and Everton. Even though they're both away, that Merseyside derby, there's always going to be goals involved in that. I think if you're looking at Liverpool players, there are some good value options which we're going to talk about when we look at specific players. But I think that Sheffield United game at home is such an enticing game. If you were going to use your wild card, you'd use it for that fixture, mainly to focus on Liverpool players. So Arsenal as well, we've got our third big team on the list, and they also double in 34. I think if it's your only chip left, as we said before, it is important to focus on that double game week in your wild card. There might be double game week teams further on, but I think if you're going to be using it now and you want to maximise the fixtures left, that double game week 34 is really worth targeting. And Arsenal, as it stands, are in great form with some fantastic playing options still to go with fixtures against teams like Luton, Wolves and Bournemouth. So the final team on this list is Brentford, and I would actually go as far as saying that Brentford probably have the best fixtures out of anyone in the league to finish the season with. I'm not saying you need to go triple Brentford, but I think someone like Ivan Toney is really worth considering. When you look at that run of fixtures after the Villa game, I think, I could see Ivan Toney scoring against all those teams. Not saying he will, but he has been capable of going on runs in the past. So let's take a look at the specific players, and we're going to start with triple Liverpool. So the double in 34 is a huge reason to go for triple Liverpool, but injuries to players such as Alisson, Trent and Matip means that players like Kelleher and Gomez are great cheap playing options, whereas they wouldn't have been otherwise. At 3.8 mil and 4.6 mil, I think they're brilliant, and for those prices, you'd probably be getting in like your substitute goalkeeper at that price and a cheap defender at that price anyway. So to have them playing for Liverpool on a title run-in is absolutely awesome. I'd also make Salah a priority, even over someone like Son. Son's got quite poor fixtures. He's got Newcastle, Arsenal, Liverpool, Chelsea and Man City still to play. And after yesterday's fixtures, when I personally had captained Son, it's not exactly a stress-free environment relying on Son and Spurs to get you points and save your fantasy league weekend. I'd much rather have Salah in my team. So it depends on where the other double lies in terms of Spurs as to whether you consider going for Son again. But for me, Salah is an absolute must and a captaincy options in game week 31. So if Alisson did come back and Kelleher lost his place, I think the impact of having a 3.8 million keeper on your bench is minimal. I've paired him up with Dubravka here, and whilst Newcastle, they're not doing very well defensively, the fixtures aren't too bad. Everton, Fulham, Palace, Sheffield United, Burnley, Brighton and Brentford still to play. And whilst we're talking about defenders, I think this may be the lowest number of clean sheets in a season ever. And with that in mind, it makes sense to put in some funds into the attack and keep the defensive options cheap. Palace have West Ham, Newcastle in game week 34, and they're both at home, and Bournemouth have Villa and Wolves. So the fact that both these defenders still have the double in 34 is the main reason they're in this team, and I think they're the sort of defenders that you wouldn't mind rotating in or out depending on the fixtures for the remaining game weeks of the season. So I'm sticking with double Arsenal. I think, they're pushing for top positions still, and they've got the double in 34 playing Wolves and Chelsea. Saka and Gabriel are impactful players. I think if you can afford Ben White, I'd maybe be tempted to go for him. And before the Man City game, Saka's actually had 9 returns in 7 games. So he's someone who is on form, and that game against Luton means, if you're wildcarding 31, you just got to attack it and, hope that they perform really well playing Luton at home. So it seems that no matter how inconsistent Chelsea are, Palmer performs. He actually has 22 attacking returns in his last 20 starts, and he is the definition of consistency. So I actually can't believe that he's only less than 40% owned at 5.8 million. I just think, why would you not get Palmer in your team? You don't have to be an FPL expert to recognise that he is performing so well this season, and at that price, you cannot find anyone better, in my opinion. So, as we talked about at the start, you need Man City players for the run-in. Having said that, defenders just aren't worth it with only 3 clean sheets in their last 21 games, and currently have defensive injuries, such as Kyle Walker. I think people are overlooking Haaland, and he probably has, we said Man City, they have the best fixtures out of any of the top 3. Foden has also actually played 90 minutes in 12 of his last 13 league games, which for me is the most important stat for a Man City attacker, is are they on the pitch? I'm rounding out the attack with Toney and Solanke. There's no space for Watkins here, and he's been a staple in a lot of our wildcard teams throughout the season, but Villa's tough fixtures and being able to get both of these players in for 1 million and 2 million cheaper than Watkins respectively makes them the preferred options for me. Brentford possibly, we said, have the best fixtures: Brighton, Sheffield United, Luton, Everton, Fulham and Bournemouth. And Solanke actually doubles in 34 as well with Villa and Wolves. And he also has 16 league goals this season. So it's not exactly he is a cheap, poor option. He's someone who is performing really well. So finishing off the squad, I've gone with Kilman and Gomez from Wolves. They're cheap enough to sit on your bench until game week 34 if you wanted. But they do have 2 home fixtures in that game week against Arsenal and Bournemouth. But the fixtures around that don't look too bad either, with Burnley, West Ham, Forest, Luton and Palace. So overall, when I put this team into Fantasy Football Hub, shout out to them, we got a team rating of 96%, which I have to say is one of the highest we've had all season, apart from when we did get 100% a couple of times. There's obviously so many variables you can have in Premier League football, but when the data backs it up, and you get 96% in your wildcard team, it is a nice safety net to know that you're probably on the right tracks. So for me, the team value is a little bit over 100 million, but at this stage of the season, if you are still playing FPL consciously, your team value probably should be about 102 million. And I think if you've got players in your team who have gone up in price throughout the season, maybe that's Palmer, Saka, maybe you've had Foden in for a while, you're going to save team value in those players as well, and it's going to bring the overall cost down of your team that you need to get. So for me, the strengths are it sets the double up very well for 34, and there are a lot of informed players in the team. We've talked about Saka, Palmer, even Foden and Toney and Solanke. I think it's a really well-rounded attack and does what we said in terms of streamlines the defensive sort of expenses and really puts all those transfer funds into where you're going to be scoring the most points. The weaknesses are it ties you into players. Unless you've still got a free hit and you can be a bit more flexible later on down the season, you're going to be relying on either free transfers or points hits to try and tackle any other double game weeks that might arise. And it does use the wildcard as well. If you were planning on using it later in the season, it depends on where you place your value of a wildcard, because there's only 8 game weeks to go. So I think if you want to make the most of your wildcard, using it right now is a good option. So yeah, let me know what you think. Are there any players that I've missed out? Are there any players that you think should be in or shouldn't be in this team? Are you wildcarding? And if you've got any questions, let me know in the comments, because it's always great to hear how you're doing and just chat FPL in general. So thank you very much for listening. Hope you're having a great game week. Good luck if you're wildcarding, and I will see you in the next one.